Hello everyone, welcome to this string lecture. So we are going to be talking more about strings data type in Python and basically what are strings. So strings are just sequence of character using the syntax of either a single quote or a double quote. So for this example, you can see right here that we have the hello, and this hello is in a single quote. This mini icon that you have right here is called a quote, and you can also use a double quote. And you can see here right here we also have a double quote, and we have I don't do that, and here you can see we have this single quote right here inside this double quotes, which really makes sense. One thing you should take note of is in Python, if you are trying to write a statement that have this single quotes right here, it's better to just wrap everything in a double quote just to avoid Python error. So that's one thing you should take note of. And because strings are ordered sequence, it means that we can actually use indexing and slicing to grab subsections of this string. And what do I mean by indexing and slicing? What this simply means is it allows you to access different characters in a string by grabbing that position. And we're going to talk more about this when we start doing examples of strings. And indexing notation using this square brackets, right? So this bracket right here is called the square bracket. And what it does is indexing uses the square bracket notation after the string or variable assigned to the string. So for example, if you have a variable name, like we did in our previous lecture, name, then we have the name is equals to Daveworld. If we want to access, for example, just the first D character in that variable name, Daveworld, then we can access D by using the index, right? The index 0. And basically what this does is Python goes ahead to take in the first character. So indexing starts from 0, and we're going to talk more about that in our previous slide, in our upcoming slides rather. So indexing allows you to grab a single character from the string. And let's look at this example. So this action use square brackets and a number index to indicate the position of what you wish to grab. And we're going to look at this in more detail. So let's take a look at this example. We have character HELLO, and we have the index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So something you should take note of is Python does not start counting with 1. Python starts counting with 0 when you want to grab index number. So if I want to grab this element h, is going to be what? This square bracket, and the number, which is going to be what? The index number, which is going to be what? 0 in this case. So if I pass in this square bracket and 0, I should get this h value. All right. So how about if I want to get the o? What am I going to do? You guessed that right. I'm going to use the square bracket, and I'm going to pass in the index number, which is 4, and I'm going to pass in 4 right here, and I'm going to grab o. So there's something that's also called reverse index, and what this does is it allows you to basically grab characters from the back. For example, if I want to grab o and I don't want to pass in 4 because I have to start counting from the beginning, 1 0 1 2 3 4, which sometimes might be stressful. What you can also do is you can grab the last one, which is -1, and it goes down the line like that also. So that's something you should also take note of. And slicing allows you to grab a subsection of multiple characters, a slice, right? So what this means is you can actually say, okay, I want to grab the word from H to L, right? So HEL. And that's what's called slicing, right? So what slicing does is like as if you are taking a particular, like a bread in this case, and you are taking a slice of the bread, right? So in Python also, you can also slice characters. You can also take the characters that you want from a particular variable or a particular list item. So this has the following syntax. You have the start, the stop, and the step. So you can pass in 3 different characters or 3 different index number. The start, the stop, and the step. So the start is basically the numerical index for the slice start. So where do you want to start the slice from? That's what the start specifies. So the stop is the index you will go up to but not include, right? For example, if I say take from 0 to 4, Python is not going to take that 4. Python is going to take what? From 0 to 3, even though you specify the stop to be 4. And you will see that in more details when we start the example. So the step is the size of the jump you want to take. So for example, and it's optional, you can only specify the start and the stop and not specify the step. But if you specify the step, what this does is If you say take from 0 to 4 and the step is 2, then what this does is once it gets to 0, it will skip 1, then go to 2. So 0, 2, 3. So it's going to jump by 2. And that's how the step works in slicing. So now that we know the concept of string, indexing, and slicing, let's jump right into our notebook to explore some of these concepts in more details. Alright guys, so I'm in my notebook right now, and you can also go ahead to create a new notebook from wherever you are saving your Python notes from. So let's quickly take a look at strings in action. So to create a string, like I specified before, you can use a single quote, and here I'm just going to say hello. So once I run this cell, you're going to see that it gets executed right here. So you can also use a phrase. You can write a phrase, right? For example, you can say this is also a string. So as far as it's inside this quote is a valid string. So you can also use double quotes, which I prefer using, right? So I can say string built with double quotes. So if I run this, it runs well. So let me tell you why I also like using double quotes. So for example, if I want to say, I want to use a single quote right here, and I want to write a statement like I am using a single quote. So if I go ahead to run this cell, you can see that we're going to have what? An error. So let me just write this here again, that single quotes, but this will create an error. So we're going to have an error. Why? Because Python sees a single quote and another single quote, which means it has opened and closed it. So it's going to take this, it's not going to read this because you are not following the syntax of Python. So to avoid this, what you can do, I'm just going to copy this, paste this here, and instead of single quotes, I'm going to use what? Double quotes, right? So if I run this cell, you can see we're going to run this cell successfully without having any error. So now, how can we print a string? So we can basically declare a string by just saying something like, let's say we have something like hello world. Right, so if I run this cell, you can see we have hello world right there. And you can also use the print statement. So what this print statement does is it allows you to print out the actual value of what you are passing in, and it's not going to return the cell number that you're seeing right here. So for example, if I say print, right, I'll say print. But you know what, before I even tell you guys about how to do this, right? So if I say, for example, hello world 1, and if I say hello world 2, now watch what's going to happen. Only the hello world 2 get executed. So in Jupyter Notebook, what this does is not actually printing out your values for you. It's just returning the last line that you basically pass into it. So the better way to actually do this is to use a print statement, and it goes like using a print, then open a parenthesis, and here you can pass in whatever string that you want to print out. So for example, if I say hello world and I run the cell, you can see that now it's coming as what? Hello world. And you can notice that it's not showing a number output right here, like what is showing right here. So this means it's an actual print statement. And I can have multiple print statements in one line. So I can say hello world 1, and I can also have hello world 2, right? I can also have I can say, okay, this is what I can just say, use \n to print a new line, right? So in case you don't know what \n is basically an escape sequence that allows you to do some cool stuff in Python. So \n allows you to print out a new line. So I can do that, and you see when I run the cell, you see what output I get. And I can also write print into brackets, and I'll do \n again, which is to print another new line. And what I'll do again here is I will say print. I'll just tell you guys, see what I mean. And if I run this cell, you're going to see something cool. So you can see that right here we have hello world 1, hello world 2, and we have use. And after the use, you can see that there was a new line, which went to the next line, and there was space to print a new line, and that's why we have space to print a new line, right? And we went ahead to what do slash n again, which basically prints a new line for us. And now we now have see what I mean, which is the last thing that we printed out, right? So that's how you can actually use print statements in Python. So now let's look at some string basics that we need to know. For example, if you want to check the total character that you have in a particular string, you can use the len function. And what this does is it returns the length of whatever string you are passing into it, right? And if I click Shift Tab, don't forget our cheat sheet. What this does, it basically tells you what that function is about. And you can see here that length, it returns the number of items in a container, right? So for example, if I pass in a string here of like hello world, and I run this cell, and you can see that right here it returns what 11. Now note, if we count this, we have 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'm sure you got confused there, right? I counted the space, right? So space in Python is also a character. That's one thing you should take note of. And that's why we are getting 11, not 10. So let's continue, and now let's go ahead to explore about string indexing. So remember I explained what string indexing are. Now let's look at how we can use them in more action. So right here, I'm going to go ahead to create a variable name. Remember how we create a variable name? We use whatever variable name that you want to use and equals to. And this variable name is just going to be s for now. And here I'm going to say s is equals to what? Hello world, right? Now if I check what we have in s, you can see now that we have hello world, right? Again, if you want to access this notebook, the link is going to be dropped in the description box below. Go ahead to check out that GitHub repo. It's going to have everything well explained there, right? So don't forget about that, guys. So if I say print into bracket s, remember it's going to print out the actual value of s and not return this output cell that we have right here. So we're printing the object right here, and here we're just checking the object basically. And for example, if I want to check out the first element that we have here, remember how we can do that? S, then we use a square bracket, and we use what? 0. So what this does is it's going to go ahead to return the first character in our string, which is what? H, right? Don't forget, Python starts counting from 0, not 1. I see beginners make that mistake a lot. So next, let's look at if we want to grab the E, we're going to do what? S, the square bracket, then 1, right? I almost wrote 2 there. So right here, you can see that we're going to have E. And if you want to grab the first L also, we can say S. I'm going to pass in what? 2, which is 0, 1, 2. This L that we have right here, right? And if I run this, you can see that we're going to have what? L. All right, now let's take a look at how we can use the semicolon to perform slicing in Python, right? So we'll look at how we can use semicolon to basically grab values from our variables or from our list and so on and so forth. But for now, we're going to be working with our string. So for example, if I say s right here, and I pass in my square brackets, and I say 1, and I put a semicolon, right? So what this does is it goes ahead to grab the index 1 and everything forward, right? So what this semicolon does is it takes 1. I'm sorry, I had to Ctrl Z there. Yeah, so it takes 1, right? And this semicolon means take everything from the front, right? So if I run this cell, you can see we're going to have what from E, which is 0, 1, E, everything to the front. So I can also do reverse. So I can see if I want to do S, and I want to take everything from the back up to 3. So what this does is it takes everything. Don't forget the last index is not going to get taken, right? So let's count it: 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So you're going to be thinking it's supposed to grab HELL, but no. Remember I said that it's not going to grab that 3. It's going to do -1, right? So it's going to take from 0 to 2. Instead of us having HELL, we're going to have what? HEL back. So if I run this cell, you can see we're going to have what? HEL here. So let me go ahead to create more cell below, B, so that we can have more space, right? More breathing space actually. So now that we have that out of the way, let's take a look at how we can use two semicolon to actually grab more complex item from the string. So for example, I can say grab s, then square bracket, and I'm going to say grab everything from the start. Remember, first one is start, second one is stop, and the third one is the step, like I explained earlier. So what this does, it takes everything and it takes the step by one. What this does for us is it goes ahead to take everything from the beginning till the end and just dropping step by step. So it's not going to skip anything, right? So if I go ahead to run this, you can see we're going to have hello world. All right. Now, how about if I want to grab this D item right here? What will I do? I can say S, right? And instead of me counting all of the characters that I have there, I can just pass in -1. And here I'm going to have D. So that's one thing you should also take note of. I can also say I want to grab everything, right? So I'll say everything up to -1, right? So what this does, it takes everything from the beginning, but it leaves out the word -1. Don't forget the stop. Python is not going to stop there. It's going to basically do -1 from that. So that's -2. So it's going to do HELLOWORL and stop there. And you can see that that's what we have there. So now that we already have that out of the way, you can go ahead to play more. You can go ahead to do more examples about slicing in Python. So let's talk about string properties in Python, right? It is very important to know that string have an important property known as immutability. And what does this mean? The immutability just means that once a string is created, the element within it cannot be changed or replaced. So now let's take a look at some examples. So as you can see here, if I say s, then for example, let's say I want to change the h from I want to change the h to x. For example, I'm going to say the first index 0, and I'll say equals to what? X, right? So if I try to do this, it's going to result in an error, right? Why? Because once a string is created, the value within it, the element within it, cannot be changed. But let's take a look at some interesting things that we can do with the elements, right? We can go ahead to concatenate values. We can add values to it. So for example, I can say s plus, and I'm going to put a string right here. And yeah, I'm just going to say concatenate me, right? So what this does is it basically adds them together, right? So concatenate in Python means that you are adding up values together, right? So if I run this cell, you're going to see we now have hello world concatenate me. So it basically joins the s together and this string that we specified concatenate me. And it's very important to know that here, if I go ahead to check s is still hello world because we have not gone ahead to change the value. So let's say we want to change the value. We can now say that s, right? You can say s is equals to s plus, then I'll just say yeah, concatenate me, right? So if I run this cell and I check s right now, you can see that our s is now what? Hello world concatenate me. You can also use the multiplication symbol to create repetition, right? So let's say we want to have like letter. Let's say we have this letter equals to, I'll just say letter is equals to z, right? And yeah, if I say letter, or say times, let me just say 10 right here. So if I run this cell, we're going to have z 10 times, right? So you can basically use this operator times to basically multiply the number of strings that you have. All right, so now that we understand that, let's take a look at some basic built-in string methods in Python. So objects in Python usually have built-in functions. We will learn about all of these object and function later in our upcoming lecture, right? But just know that methods or functions in Python are just some bunch of reusable codes that was already written there for us so that we can use it over in our Python code, and it makes life much more easier for us, right? So there are a lot of methods, there are a lot of built-in methods, there are a lot of built-in functions in Python that would really help you in your programming journey. But poco a poco, we are going to get to understand and know each of every one of them one by one. All right. So the first built-in method, so let's check what we have in our S before we continue. So we see I have hello world concatenate me, and the first built-in method I'd like to tell you about is s dot upper, right? And what this does, don't forget shift tab is going to tell you the about the function, right? So what this does is basically return a copy of the string converted towards uppercase, right? So if I go ahead to run the cell, you're going to see everything now is in uppercase, right? So you guessed it right. We have upper, we are going to also have what lower, right? And what lower does is basically the opposite of what upper does. It returns the lower case of all the characters of that string, right? So one thing that's also interesting in Python is we also have splits, right? So you can say s dot split, and what this does is I can do shift tab to check what it does, and you can see that it returns the substring in a string using a separator, and we have to pass in a separator of what we want to separate it by, right? By default is none, but what we can do right here is we can go ahead to pass in a default separator. So let's see, let's split it by w. All right, so you can say split by w, and basically what this does is it returns a list of the splitted word. But before I do this first, let's take a look at space first. We can actually split it by space. So let's see if we have hello world concatenate and me. Let's try to split by space first, right? And let's see what we have, right? So if I don't pass in anything, right, none. So if I don't pass in anything, it's going to print it. It's going to separate it as space as we have here, right? But if I want to separate by a particular character, let's say W. So I'll say s dot split, and I'll say W, right? So if I run this cell, I'm going to have what hello, then orld concatenates me. Why? Because it went ahead to split it by W, by this W. So it's going to separate the values. That's why we have hello space and orld concatenates me, right? So now there are many built-in methods in Python, which we are also going to talk more about it as we move on with the lecture. And to be honest, you don't need to cram all of the methods that we have in Python. Just know that you can do a quick Google search anytime you need them. Heads up, know that there are built-in methods in Python that basically makes your work much more easier. So with that being said, now that we already understand what strings are in Python, in our upcoming lecture, we're going to talk more about print formatting with strings. So we're going to look at how we can print variables, how we can concatenate values and all of that. And I'll see you in the next lecture. Bye bye.